We're diving deep today into, well, one of the truly foundational texts of Western ethical thought.
We really are.
And we're going to try and forget the textbooks for a bit and go straight to this core human question that has driven philosophy for, what, millennia. How do we become good?
Exactly. And the text we're engaging with is Plato's pivotal dialogue, the Meno. And, this conversation is really less about finding a definitive answer
For
and
sure.
more about framing the search for moral excellence, for what the Greeks called arpeto.
Right, argetu. Can this virtue, this quality of being excellent in, well, in every capacity, can that actually be taught?
Or is it something you're just born with, a matter of nature? Or maybe it's just luck, or, as we'll find out, something far more mysterious, maybe even divine.
So our mission today is to act as your expert, guides through this pretty complex material. We are going to logically reconstruct every major turn in the argument.
Define the absolute crucial terms.
Yes, and unpack the one passage that I think really ties the entire discussion together, giving you the tools to understand this pivotal text with speed and precision.
And the material we're working with today comes from key excerpts of the Meno. It features Socrates, the master inquirer who famously claims to know nothing,
Of course.
and Meno, who's this young, very confident, almost cocky Thessalian aristocrat.
And Meno has all the trappings of worldly success, right? He's just studied under Gorgias, who is one of the most famous rhetoricians of the day.
The very people who claim they could teach you virtue for a fee.
And the political backdrop here is just, it's sizzling hot. I mean, Meno's local sponsor in Athens is a man named Anytus.
A very powerful democratic politician.
Exactly. And we mentioned Anytus because he actually joins the conversation later, and he is historically significant as one of the three men who eventually brought the charge against Socrates,
The charge of impiety and corrupting the youth.
leading to his execution. So you could feel this tension between the Socratic search for truth and the political realities of Athens already simmering right beneath this seemingly simple philosophical chat.
It's all there. And the dialogue starts so abruptly. Meno just throws down the gauntlet, asking for the source of virtue before they've even agreed on what virtue is.
That's the exact quote.
He says, "Can you tell me, Socrates, can virtue be taught? Or is it not teachable but the result of practice? Or is it neither of these, but men possess it by nature or in some other way?"
He's asking about the qualities of virtue, its teachability, its origin,
Mm-hmm.
before defining the essence. It's like asking if a diamond is expensive before you've even agreed on what a diamond is.
And Socrates' response is foundational to the entire Socratic method and really the premise of this whole dialogue.
It's classic Socrates.
It is. He argues we cannot possibly know the attributes or qualities of something until we know its essence, its form. He insists, if I do not know what something is, how could I know what qualities it possesses?
The what is it has to come before the what is it like.
Always. The search for the essence must precede everything else.
So we have to start there. Before we can figure out if arto is teachable, we have to try to define it. Let's get the high-level synthesis first. Where does this incredibly complex philosophical journey ultimately take us?
Okay. The high-level view.
Let's do it.
If we distill the author's central claim down to its most potent form, the executive thesis of the Meno is basically this. The inquiry into whether virtue can be taught reveals that virtue is either knowledge and therefore teachable.
Okay, that makes sense.
Or, and this is the big turn, more likely, it's a beneficial form of what he calls true opinion, that is actually a divine gift, something acquired without any rational understanding.
Wow. Okay, so that one sentence really captures this profound shift in the text, doesn't it? It's a movement from the certainty of something like mathematics, which suggests virtue must be knowledge,
Right, something clean and logical.
to the messy, inconclusive reality of politics and human nature, which suggests it has to be something else entirely.
And to really understand why Plato felt he needed to write this, you have to grasp the central problem he was tackling in Athens at the time.
Right, the context.
The Meno isn't just some abstract academic discussion. It's written directly into the political and moral anxiety of 5th and 4th century BCE Athens. The core problem the text is trying to solve is, well, it's existential for the Athenian state.
Which is,
How can moral goodness, how can virtù be reliably acquired and then transmitted to the next generation of leaders?
and this anxiety was only amplified by the rise of the sophists, right?
Absolutely.
This new professional class of educators who were, in Socrates' view, selling a counterfeit product.
Precisely. This dialogue is a direct and, frankly, a sustained response to the sophists, especially people like Gorgias and Protagoras. They charge these exorbitant fees to teach people how to be effective public speakers, how to be political leaders.
They were basically commodifying success.
That's a perfect way to put it. They didn't claim to teach the essence of virtue. They taught rhetorical techniques, strategies, shortcuts, all the tools you'd need to gain power in the marketplace, the agora, and the assembly.
The danger there, from a Socratic perspective, is that if virtue can just be bought and sold, and if it's based on rhetorical tricks, then it has no genuine metaphysical foundation. It's just relative opinion easily manipulated.
Absolutely. So Plato felt he needed to provide two things at the same time. First, a metaphysical foundation for the possibility of genuine, objective, moral truth.
Okay.
And second, a clear rebuttal to the sophists. He had to show that even if virtue were teachable, their methods were not the right way to teach it. And in fact, many truly excellent people failed to teach it at all.
But before they can even get to the teachability question, Socrates runs into these two major roadblocks that are designed to just shut down the whole inquiry.
Yes.
The first is Meneto's complete inability to grasp this concept of a universal essence, which Socrates needs to establish to even begin defining virtue.
Yes, the famous swarm of virtues. It starts around 72a in the text. Socrates asks, what is virtue? And Meno, in a way that's typical of someone trained by a rhetorician, just gives a list of specific culturally relevant examples.
Not a definition.
Not at all. He says the virtue of a man is managing public affairs well. The virtue of a woman is managing the home well. The virtue of a child is different again.
It's practical, I guess, but for a philosopher, it's just fundamentally inadequate.
It is. Meno is treating virtue as a collection of social roles, not a single unifying principle. And so Socrates uses that famous bee analogy. He says, if you ask me what a bee is, I wouldn't be satisfied if you just gave me a list of big bees, small bees, or busy bees. I want to know the single quality, the universal essence, or form the eidos that makes them all bees.
And he gets Meno to agree that something like health or strength has the same form everywhere, right? Regardless of who has it.
Exactly. The philosophical mission here is to find that single unifying eidos for I2.
But Meno gets frustrated. He's not used to this kind of thinking. And so he throws up the second, much more paralyzing roadblock.
Yes, this one is a doozy.
The challenge to the very possibility of inquiry itself.
This is Meno's paradox, often called the debater's argument. It's a logically sound trap that says searching for anything new is completely futile.
How does he put it?
Meno basically asks, how can you search for virtue if you don't know what it is? And if you already know what it is, why would you bother searching?
It's the ultimate intellectual procrastination tool, isn't it?
It really is.
If you buy into that paradox, your entire philosophical journey ends before it even begins.
Which means Socrates has to overcome this challenge before the discussion can possibly continue. And that really sets the stage for the rigorous logical reconstruction we're about to undertake.
Okay, so let's do it. We are moving away from the narrative now and zooming in on the philosophical architecture. We need to see how Socrates uses logic, demonstration, and these conditional arguments to move Meno from, well, philosophical paralysis to the final profound conclusion.
And we should begin with the argument Meno uses to shut down the inquiry in the first place. This is the logical trap that Socrates knew he had to spring Meno from, or the entire dialogue would be, well, completely pointless.
Right. Let's start with the paradox itself. Lay it out for us.
Okay, so the first argument chain is Meno's paradox. It's elegant, simple, and utterly debilitating.
Premise one.
Premise one. A man cannot search for what he knows since he already knows it and, has no need to search.
Okay, that's straightforward enough.
Premise two. A man cannot search for what he does not know since he doesn't know what to look for, or even if he found it, he wouldn't recognize it.
So you're damned if you know it and you're damned if you don't.
Exactly. Which leads to the conclusion. Therefore, a man cannot productively search or inquire at all.
The power of this paradox is its ability to induce what they called aporia, that state of being utterly at a loss.
Yes.
It makes people idle and faint-hearted, as Socrates notes. It gives you the perfect excuse to just stop thinking critically.
It's the ultimate skeptic's weapon. I mean, if you are stuck in this framework, any kind of progress is impossible because you can always be accused of either knowing the answer beforehand, which makes the search redundant,
Right.
or not knowing the criteria for the answer, which makes any discovery purely accidental. Socrates cannot let this stand, not just for the sake of this one dialogue, but really for the sake of philosophy itself.
So he counters. And he counters with this profound, some might say strange, metaphysical doctrine of recollection or anamnesis.
Mm-hmm.
He has to prove that the search is possible
No.
because we already possess the knowledge, just in an unactivated form.
And this moves us to the most famous, most detailed part of the entire text, the demonstration with the slave boy.
Okay, let's walk through this.
So Socrates introduces the doctrine of recollection by citing what he calls a true and beautiful story from wise men and women. It's a poetic, almost mystical justification for the immortality of the soul.
The idea being that the soul is immortal, it's been born many times.
And therefore, it has seen all things that exist both here and in the underworld, so it already knows everything.
The implication, then, is that what we call learning is just stirring up this innate prior knowledge.
Exactly. And to prove this, Socrates calls forward a slave boy, a young man who has had zero formal education in geometry.
And the experiment is a geometry problem.
It is. It's about finding a square with an area double that of a given square. In this case, an 8-foot square based on an original 4-foot square, which has sides of 2 feet.
This demonstration is so cool. You have to understand the details. So Socrates starts with a square, side is 2 feet, so the area is 4 square feet.
Right. And he asks the boy, how do we double that area to 8 square feet?
And the boy, using just basic common sense arithmetic, confidently guesses that if you double the side, you'll double the area.
A very natural guess.
So he proposes a side of 4 feet.
Socrates then actually draws the 4x4 square and shows him that the area is 16 square feet. He visibly demonstrates that the boy's proposed square is 4 times the size of the original, not 2 times.
And crucially, the boy is forced to concede he was wrong.
This moment, the realization of error is fundamental. The slave boy enters the state of aporia. He is perplexed. He now realizes he doesn't know.
And Socrates pauses here to make a point to Meno, right?
He does. He says that making the boy realize his own ignorance is a benefit to him because it enables him to long to know. He's better off now being confused than he was when he was confidently wrong.
Okay, so the boy then tries a side of 3 feet, which gives you 9 square feet. Still wrong, but he's getting closer.
Right. So Socrates guides the boy to see that the side of the double square must be somewhere between 2 and 4 feet. He then focuses the boy's attention on the internal structure of that big 16-foot square, dividing it into 4 equal 2x2 squares.
And then comes the key move.
The key move. He draws the diagonals connecting the corners of those 4 smaller squares, forming a new square in the center.
And the boy sees it. The square formed on the diagonal of the original 2x2 square is exactly half of the 16-foot square.
Meaning it's 8 square feet. He's found the answer. And Socrates stresses over and over that he never told the boy the answer. He only asked questions to elicit the boy's own internal opinions.
And this whole elaborate demonstration allows Socrates to draw a definitive logical conclusion that refutes Meno's paradox.
Yes, so here is the logical reconstruction of that proof.
Argument chain 2.
Premise 1. The slave boy was not taught geometry in his present life, but he developed true opinions about the correct geometric solution purely through questioning.
Check.
Premise 2. If these opinions were not acquired in his present life, they must have been acquired at some other time, that is, when his soul was not incarnate as a human being.
Okay.
Premise 3. The soul, therefore, exists and possesses this theoretical knowledge during all time.
Which leads to the big conclusion.
The conclusion. Therefore, what men call learning is actually recollection, or anamnesis, confirming the soul is immortal and possesses all theoretical and moral knowledge from birth.
Okay, stop right there. I have to put my skeptical hat on for a second.
Please do.
Isn't this just sophisticated, very clever, guided teaching? I mean, Socrates is a masterful questioner, but he is directing the boy's attention precisely to the diagonals.
A fair challenge.
If Socrates already believes the answer is innate, couldn't this entire demonstration just be a kind of confirmation bias, where he skillfully prompts the boy until he gets the desired result and then masks what is essential teaching by calling it recollection?
That is the perennial critique of the Meno, and it's a necessary one. It's a very good point. Here's how Socrates might respond. If he had simply told the boy the answer, that the side is the diagonal, the boy would have had a true opinion, a correct belief.
Okay.
But by guiding him to discover the geometrical relationships through logical necessity, Socrates argues he is activating the boy's internal logos, the account of the reason why.
Ah, so it's about the why.
It's all about the why. The difference is the boy's ability to articulate the underlying logical structure, not just spit back the correct numerical answer. If it were just teaching, the boy would still be dependent on Socrates. Here, Socrates argues, the boy is now dependent on his own soul's innate knowledge.
That makes the stakes really clear. So recollection means inquiry is possible.
It is.
And since it's possible, they can finally return to Meno's original question about virtue. But they still haven't defined the essence of virtue.
No, they're still stuck on that.
So Socrates shifts methods again.
Correct. We move to argument chain 3, which is the conditional approach. He adopts the geometric hypothesis method.
Explain that.
Well, in geometry, if you want to know if a certain triangle can be inscribed in a circle, you might assume that it can be, and then see if the resulting properties are logically possible.
So you work backwards from an assumption.
Exactly. Here, since they can't define the essence of virtue, they will assume a quality to test its reality.
And the stipulation is, if virtue is a kind of knowledge, then it must be teachable.
And if it's not knowledge, it's not teachable. They proceed by hypothesizing that virtue is knowledge, based on the very reasonable assumption that virtue must be something beneficial.
This next part is a powerful logical sequence. It really argues for the superiority of rational direction in all aspects of life.
It does. So premise 1, virtue, or agoro, is something inherently good and beneficial.
They agree on that.
Premise 2, all the capacities of the soul, things like courage, moderation, quickness, memory, are only beneficial when they are directed by wisdom or understanding.
And when they're directed by folly or recklessness.
These same qualities are harmful. Courage without wisdom is just recklessness.
Right.
Premise 3, the same goes for all external goods. Wealth, health, strength, beauty. They are also only beneficial when directed by the wise soul. Otherwise, they can lead to ruin.
Okay, that all seems to follow.
So premise 4, since virtue is beneficial, that was P1, and only wisdom or knowledge makes things truly beneficial, that was P2 and P3, then virtue must be a kind of wisdom or knowledge.
And the initial conclusion from this chain?
The initial conclusion is, therefore, virtue is knowledge, and those who possess virtue are so by learning, not by nature or by luck.
This feels like the high water mark of the rationalist position in the dialogue. If virtue is the greatest good, and only knowledge makes things truly good and beneficial, then virtue must be knowledge. It feels so clean.
It's a beautiful argument.
But Socrates immediately throws a wrench into his own beautiful argument.
He does. He recognizes that a theoretical conclusion, however logical it may be, must align with empirical reality.
With the real world.
Right. If virtue is knowledge, it must be teachable. And if it is teachable, there must be teachers.
And the absence of teachers would be a refutation of the entire hypothesis.
Exactly. And this doubt leads directly to the final, most politically and psychologically resonant argument chain, which uses Athenian social reality to dismantle the conclusion of the previous argument.
This is where it gets really interesting.
This section shifts from abstract metaphysics right back to the harsh reality of Athens. The argument is based purely on observation of civic life. Premise 1. If something can be consistently taught, there must be recognized, consistent teachers and learners of that subject.
Simple enough. So the search for teachers of virtue begins, and it immediately runs into trouble with Anytus, Meno's sponsor, who conveniently jumps into the conversation right at this moment.
Yes, Anytus is brought in to offer his expert opinion on who teaches virtue. And Socrates, probably with a bit of a twinkle in his eye, suggests the sophists, since they are the only ones who actually claim the title.
And Anytus's reaction is not calm.
Not at all. Which brings us to premise 2, and it's his testimony. The sophists are not recognized, consistent teachers of virtue. According to Anytus, they are corruptors who cause the ruin and corruption of their followers, and they charge these unjust fees.
His reaction is violent, it's political. He represents this establishment fear of intellectual outsiders who are challenging traditional moral authority.
He even warns Socrates to be careful about speaking ill of powerful men, which is a chilling bit of foreshadowing.
The implication here is crucial, right? Anytus sees virtue as something inherent to the traditional Athenian gentleman. It's not something that can be bought or taught by these itinerant foreigners.
But Socrates takes Anytus's assertion and pushes it further. He says, okay, if the sophists aren't the teachers, then surely the most respected, virtuous Athenian gentlemen themselves are the teachers.
And that's where the real political explosion happens.
It is. Socrates starts naming the biggest names in Athenian history, men whose virtue Anytus deeply respects. Themistocles, Aristides, Pericles, Thucydides. He notes that these men were masters of civic excellence and technical skills.
They taught their sons horsemanship, wrestling, music.
All the technical
Oh,
skills. And this is premise 3, the gentleman's failure. These famous, virtuous Athenian leaders failed conspicuously to pass on their own virtue to their sons. Themistocles was a brilliant leader, but his son, Cleophantus, was known only as a great horseman. He did not inherit his father's civic goodness.
and Pericles,
Yeah.
the greatest statesman of his era.
Pericles made sure his sons, Perillus and Xanthippus, received the absolute best technical education available, yet he could not instill his own goodness in them.
That is such a damning observation of Athenian culture. It undermines the entire idea of inherited or socially transmitted virtue.
It really does.
It shows that the greatest exemplars of Areto failed at the one task that was most expected of them, making their successors equally good. I mean, if Pericles, with all his resources and intellect, couldn't teach it, who on earth can?
And Socrates extends this failure to the broader educational consensus.
How so?
Well, this is premise 4, inconsistency. He points out that neither those who claim to teach virtue, like the sophists, and he notes that Gorgias himself often denies he teaches virtue,
Right.
nor the traditional wordy men, like the Athenian leaders, can even agree on whether virtue can be taught in the first place. He even cites the self-contradictory poet Theognis, who in one passage says virtue is teachable, and in another says it isn't.
So there's no consensus anywhere.
None. This lack of consensus proves the subject is not grounded in any kind of consistent knowledge.
So the empirical search for teachers fails, just spectacularly.
Utterly.
And the logical consequence is immediate and devastating to that nice, clean argument they just built.
Right. The final conclusion of this chain is, since there are no recognized, consistent teachers of virtue, virtue cannot be taught, and therefore the hypothesis that virtue is knowledge must be false.
So now we're left in a state of complete contradiction. Argument chain 3 proves virtue must be knowledge.
And argument chain 4 proves it cannot be knowledge.
The way out of this dilemma forces Socrates to pivot and ask a new question. Is it possible that something other than knowledge can be equally beneficial?
And that question brings us to the crucial distinction between true opinion and knowledge.
Okay, but before we unpack that final pivot, let's take a moment to secure the crucial vocabulary. To really master the Meno, you have to be absolutely clear on Plato's precise technical use of these terms. They're the scaffolding of the whole argument.
Precision is everything in philosophy. We have to provide definitions based strictly on how they function within this specific dialogue.
Let's start with the big one. Virtue, or arto.
Okay, so in this context, virtue, arto, is the single essential quality or form common to all good actions and all good individuals, regardless of their gender, age, or task. It's the core target of the whole inquiry.
And it's what Meno fails to articulate with his swarm of examples.
Exactly. And the tool for finding that essence is the form, eidos.
Right.
The eidos is the underlying universal essence that makes something what it is. It's the concept of a shared identity that makes all bees bees, or what makes all virtues virtues.
Okay, and then we have the big roadblock.
Meno's paradox, or the debater's argument. This is the challenge that inquiry is logically impossible because you can neither search for what you know nor for what you do not know. Socrates calls it an argument designed to make one idle and faint-hearted.
And a solution to that paralyzing doubt.
Recollection, anamnesis. This is the metaphysical theory that the immortal soul already possesses all theoretical and moral knowledge from its past lives. So what we call learning is just the process of questioning or stirring up this innate prior knowledge. It's not about receiving information from an external source.
And the method they use to test the teachability question.
That's the hypothesis. Geometric method. It's a provisional assumption used to investigate the qualities of something like virtue, whose essence isn't yet known. It lets you use conditional reasoning. If X is true, then Y must follow.
And now for the two concepts that provide the dialogue's really complex and fascinating conclusion.
Right. First is true opinion, or right opinion. This is a correct belief about how to act that leads to beneficial and correct results. Functionally, in terms of the outcome, it's identical to knowledge.
Like getting to Larissa.
Exactly. But it crucially lacks rational stability. It's missing the account of the reason why.
Which is what defines knowledge. Episteme.
Precisely. Knowledge is true opinion that has been tied down and secured by that account of the reason why, the rational explanation, the process of recollection. That rational justification is what makes the belief stable, permanent, and transferable.
And what about when you have that beneficial outcome, but no knowledge?
That's the last term, divine gift inspiration, the moira. This is the final, sort of inconclusive explanation for the success of great men who lead correctly through true opinion but lack the rational knowledge to justify or teach their actions. They're compared to inspired soothsayers and prophets whose success is spontaneous, accidental, and completely non-transferable.
That distinction between true opinion and knowledge is where the entire debate hinges, isn't it? We have to dedicate some serious time to unpacking the moment Socrates finally draws the line between them.
It's the heart of the matter.
So, if the Meno were a building, the conclusion of argument chain 4, that failure to find any teachers, is the wrecking ball. Socrates carries down the idea that virtue is knowledge, but he still has to account for someone like Pericles. He was successful.
He was. So he has to introduce something that works like knowledge but isn't actually knowledge.
And that something is true opinion.
Which leads to the most dense, beautiful, and complex analogy in the entire text. It's designed to show why, despite achieving the same practical result, knowledge is far, far superior to true opinion. This is the crux of the dialogue.
Okay, let's get to it. What's the analogy?
The analogy is of the mythical statues of Daedalus. It appears around 97d, 98b in the text, and it's all about explaining stability and permanence. Would you like me to read the passage?
Please.
Socrates says, "It is because you have paid no attention to the statues of Daedalus, that they too run away and escape if one does not tie them down, but remain in place if tied down. True opinions. For true opinions, as long as they remain, are a fine thing, and all they do is good, but they are not willing to remain long, and they escape from a man's mind, so that they are not worth much until one ties them down by giving an account of the reason why. And that, Meno, my friend, is recollection. After they are tied down, in the first place they become knowledge, and then they remain in place."
The imagery there is just stunning. This beautiful, correct opinion that will literally run away from your mind unless you tether it somehow.
Let's break down exactly why Socrates needs this complex imagery, starting with the immediate problem he's trying to solve.
Well, the initial problem, which they established right before this, is the functional equivalence of true opinion and knowledge in practical life.
Right, the Larissa example.
Exactly. If you are guiding someone to the city of Larissa and you know the road, you succeed. If you merely guess the road correctly, if you have true opinion, you also succeed.
And Meno is from Thessaly, so Larissa is a relevant city for him. Socrates is making this point highly practical and personal.
He is. And it raises the question, if the outcome is the same, why bother pursuing the difficult path of knowledge? It seems wasteful to do all that philosophical work if the practical result is identical.
Right.
Why isn't true opinion good enough?
It does seem wasteful until you introduce this concept of stability. That's the whole game. Daedalus was this legendary Athenian craftsman whose statues were so lifelike they were believed to be capable of literally walking away unless you secured them.
Like tying them to a post.
Exactly. And Socrates says true opinions are like those magnificent, lifelike statues. They are excellent when they're present, they guide your actions correctly, they lead to good outcomes, but they are inherently unreliable because they are not anchored.
So they're easily forgotten, easily questioned.
Easily persuaded away by external forces, a sudden doubt, a frightening event, or a new persuasive speaker, a sophist perhaps, can cause that true opinion to just escape from the mind.
That makes so much sense. Imagine a statesman who intuitively, instinctively knows the right path for the city.
A kind of gut feeling.
Right, that intuition, that true opinion, guides him correctly during a crisis. But because he can't articulate why it's the right path, because he lacks the rational defense for it.
He might be talked out of it by a more persuasive orator in the assembly who offers a flawed but very logical-sounding counter-argument. His gut feeling just isn't enough to withstand a rational attack.
So the stability of the belief is the only real differentiating factor. And that stability comes from the tying down.
That's the key technical phrase, the logos, the account of the reason why. Knowledge, episteme, is true opinion that has been secured or tied down by rational justification.
And it's that justification that provides the necessary stability, making the knowledge permanent and impervious to shifting circumstances or counter-persuasion.
And this is so brilliant. He links this tying down process back directly to the metaphysical proof they established earlier with the slave boy.
To recollection.
Yes, Socrates explicitly states that the process of justifying the belief, of giving the rational account, is precisely the act of recollection.
So when the slave boy discovered the geometrical proof for himself, he converted a tentative guess, a true opinion, into secured knowledge.
He tied it down with the necessity of geometry. And this is the punchline. The great statesmen, Pericles and Themistocles, never subjected their political brilliance to that kind of rational rigor. So their true opinion was never secured.
Which is why they couldn't teach it to their sons. It was just a beautiful, untethered statue.
Exactly.
Let's use a concrete modern analogy to really seal this distinction between functional correctness and rational stability.
Okay, we've used a financial example before, but let's go deeper into the modern professional world, the world of expertise and technical skill.
Let's look at two individuals who are both successful at, say, a complex engineering problem.
Perfect. Take a mechanical engineer who is solving a high-stakes failure in a bridge structure.
Okay.
The first engineer has true opinion. She has 10, maybe 15 years of practical, on-the-ground experience. She looks at the failure and immediately knows, just based on instinct and repeated successful prior solutions, exactly where the structural reinforcement is needed.
Her gut tells her what to do.
Her gut tells her what to do. She directs the crew to fix it. The bridge is saved. Her opinion was true, and the result was beneficial. She got to Larissa.
But she doesn't have the account of the reason why.
She doesn't. So if a junior engineer comes to her and says, but the new regulations require a different alloy based on the finite element analysis, she can only rely on authority and experience. She says, trust me, I've seen this a dozen times.
And if the junior engineer presses her, or if the problem has some subtle deviation from her past experience,
her intuition, her true opinion, is likely to fail or escape her mind because it is not secured by a first principle. It's brittle.
Okay, now let's look at the difference for the person with knowledge.
So the second engineer has the same experience, but when she identifies the solution, she can immediately refer back to the reasons why. She can mathematically model the failure using the principles of materials science and structural load calculations.
She can show her work.
She can show her work. She can identify the specific vector failure and articulate the logos, the rational account that requires the reinforcement she's proposing.
So when the junior engineer questions her, she doesn't just rely on instinct.
No, she replies with physics, mathematics, and codified principles. Her conviction is tied down by rational justification. It's a statue that cannot run away.
And here's the critical difference, right? She can actually teach this.
That's it. She can take that understanding and transfer it to the junior engineer systematically, effectively teaching it. The first engineer, operating on true opinion, can only say, watch me and try to mimic my success.
A kind of apprenticeship of intuition.
Yes. The second engineer, operating on knowledge, can transfer the methodology and the reasoning. And that is why knowledge is teachable, and true opinion, however successful it might be in the moment, is not.
And this failure to teach is precisely why Socrates concluded that Pericles must have operated only on true opinion.
It's the only explanation that fits the evidence.
This brings us to the final, necessary philosophical step. If virtue is this true opinion, and true opinion is inherently unstable and non-transferable, yet we see successful virtuous leaders throughout history, how did they get that true opinion in the first place, if it wasn't taught and it wasn't figured out through reason?
The failure of teachability forces the dialogue to a supernatural explanation.
The divine gift.
The divine gift.
Okay, wait a minute. Again, as your friendly skeptic, I have to ask, isn't calling virtue a divine gift just philosophical surrender?
It feels like it, doesn't it?
It does. After building this incredibly complex, rigorous framework of recollection and logical argument, hasn't Socrates essentially thrown his hands up and admitted defeat? Isn't you just saying, if it can't be taught, it must be magic?
That is a brilliant and totally necessary question. It certainly feels like a massive philosophical cop-out, especially coming from Plato, whose entire life project is to base morality on pure rationality.
So what's the defense?
The defense is that Socrates is not surrendering his search for the essence of virtue. He is merely, and I think honestly, accepting the empirical data gathered in Argument Chain 4.
The data about the failure of the great statesman to teach.
Exactly. The real-world data suggests that virtue, as it's practiced by these great men, does not behave like knowledge. It's not teachable.
And it's not simply acquired by birth or nature, as the sons of Pericles prove?
Right. So if it's not knowledge and it's not from nature, it must be a spontaneous, beneficial state that is granted by a higher power, theomoira, or divine dispensation.
And he uses the analogy of soothsayers and prophets.
He does. They say true things, they guide people correctly, but they have no logos, no rational account for their guidance. They are guided by inspiration, not by understanding.
So it's not a true explanation so much as a category for things that defy rational explanation, using the criteria they've established so far.
Precisely. It is the only remaining bucket for beneficial but non-transferable goodness. And that's why the Meno ends on this provisional, some might say disappointing note. It's setting the stage for all the future Platonic dialogues, which have to go back and tackle that foundational question he started with. What is virtue?
Because if they could just secure the definition of the essence,
The question of teachability would solve itself.
what a rigorous journey we've just completed. We started with Meno's blunt, almost rude question, navigated the paralyzing Meno's paradox, and then proved the possibility of inquiry through the immortal soul's act of recollection.
We then use the geometric hypothesis method to tentatively conclude that virtue must be knowledge because it's beneficial, only to have that logical conclusion violently refuted by the messy reality of Athenian politics.
The failure of men like Pericles to pass on their goodness.
And that refutation forced the critical pivot, the necessary distinction between true opinion, which is beneficial but unstable,
The runaway statue.
and secured knowledge, or episteme, which is beneficial and stable because it has been tied down by the rational account.
The final humbling balance is that the practical success of these great leaders seems to rely on this highly beneficial but fleeting true opinion, which Socrates then provisionally labels a divine gift.
And this puts them philosophically in the same category as poets and prophets. They're inspired, but they're unable to explain or transfer their inspiration.
And the conversation concludes with Socrates basically insisting that the entire project remains unfinished. We have to go back to the very beginning to define what virtue is before we can speak definitively about where it comes from.
And this leaves you, the listener, with a really profound challenge. If you accept Plato's analysis that success in life, whether it's in business or politics or your own personal ethics, can be achieved through this beneficial but unstable true opinion, does that realization reduce the value of knowledge? Or does it actually heighten the ethical imperative to seek it?
Because if the practical results are the same, why bother with the difficulty of tying down that truth with rational justification?
It's a real question.
And the Mykainos seems to suggest the answer lies in transferability and stability. That maybe we have a moral responsibility to seek the stability of knowledge, because only knowledge can be systematically passed on, taught, and relied upon when the going gets tough.
That pursuit of the logos behind the action gives us the framework for all future ethical inquiry.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Plato's enduring philosophical legacy.